Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss again here at allpointstv.com, and we are getting started again around 2 o'clock here on Monday. And we are here every Monday. You can count it. You can set your calendar by the time that we appear on the camera. Glad to have you with us, Facebook. And we are very happy that we are writing back on that channel with our columns. I do a daily column on Facebook. And I think my columns, John, are the longest ones we have on that network. Sometimes I start writing, and before I know it, my problem is trying to cut down the size of my articles, because before I know it, I've gotten about 5 or 6 pages, and I know that Facebook does not really want us to be taking up so much space on that channel. But we're very glad that we're back on the channel, and I want to commend Facebook. So far, they left me alone. John, they're not, I guess they haven't objected to anything I've written so far, but I'll stay at it until we'll prick some nerves over there. But we're glad you're with us today, and we're also glad to have our other audiences there with us as well. That's WFOV 92.1, and we are allpointstv.com. Well, folks, I don't know if I have some good news or bad news today. The good news is that we are still fighting the deep state. We have a full-blown, if there was any question about it, we have a full-blown coup d'etat in the works in this country. And Benjamin Franklin, your words back at the Constitution Convention ring very true today, and that was when the person asked you, what were you doing in that room when you met there starting on June 25th, 1787, and stayed there to September the 17th, 8 days before 3 months had passed. So almost 3 months they were in that room meeting, hammering out a document that was intended to do what the Articles of Confederation had failed to do, which was, on the one hand, to give the authority to the central government so it could act on behalf of the 13 states and act as an umbrella protection of those states. At the same time, to limit the power of the central government so that it would not get out of control. And so when this lady asked Benjamin Franklin, what are y'all doing in that room? Because there was such a secrecy around what they were doing, because they knew in that room they were going beyond the mandate from which they had come to Philadelphia, which was revised Articles of Confederation. But when they got in the room and began to put all these minds together, they realized that it was beyond repair. You could not fix a document so flawed. There were just too many different things in it that it would have compelled them to write the whole document. And so that's in fact what they did. They were asking Benjamin Franklin, well, they're asking the whole group, quite frankly, but Franklin was the one that answered, what are you doing in that room? And Franklin said, we are creating a republic if you can keep it.
Oh, by the way, I just recently on Facebook, there's an advertisement for this new book that was coming out. And in the wording of it, they said something about, the democracy. And I actually said, it's not a democracy. The Constitution doesn't have democracy in it. And this one guy told me to shut my GD lying mouth up.
Really?
Yeah. And this guy, so I looked on his, I should say his name, embarrass him publicly. I looked, he's got some degree in political science, which usually means it's a person, political scientists usually are a leftist.
Yeah.
People study that because that's basically, they don't want to work for a living. So they study something like that so they could find a way of glomming on to a local government position or some bureaucratic position so they can have a good, real easy lifestyle, and they can be self-righteous and priggish about everything, and they think they know so much when you could. But I mean, now what you just said, I know he's going to go to that next about, Franklin said democracy. I don't think that was, even though, but if you got to look, I worded it in the Constitution, the democracy is not mentioned at all.
Right.
He called me, but he told me to shut my lying GD mouth up.
Wow, that is tremendously, a person is tremendously misinformed. The Constitution says in Article 4, Section 4, that every state is guaranteed a Republican form of government. And not only that, you can go and listen to the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. You know, the Pledge of Allegiance that goes back to Earl Bellamy, where it says, and to the republic, I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands, meaning the republic for which the flag stands. And so this idea, in fact, you won't find, I think John was saying this a minute ago, and that is, you won't find the word democracy in either one of the two founding documents of the country. You don't find it in the Declaration of Independence, written primarily by the great American philosopher Thomas Jefferson on a committee of 5. And you won't find it in the Constitution, where the 55 members were, in fact, the ones at the end of the convention were still there, trying to bring the new Constitution into life. Now they have to go out there and sell it, but the idea was that now we have a document that would, in fact, bring into existence what was said in Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. You probably remember him saying on November the 19th, let me see if I'm right here, 1863, I am right here. November the 19th, 1863, when Lincoln gave a speech really he had written out on the envelope. He had not really prepared the text and didn't think it was really going to be memorialized over the millennium, but that speech is one of the great speeches in history, where Lincoln was saying 77 years ago, our fathers brought forth in this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. And so that nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. I said the proposition of that. I don't mean that it had been perfected at that time, and we're still perfecting, and we'll continue to perfect it. It will never actually be done. That work is one that's always in transit. And every population, by the way, must in fact ensure that the next generation will enjoy a Republican form of government, which is under attack right now in this country as we speak. But Franklin said they were creating a republic. A Republican form of government is guaranteed in the Constitution, not a democracy. And if people could just understand, quite frankly, what a democracy is in terms of the crushing of the minority voice. Because if you have just the numbers to rule the day, you don't have to then worry about the rule of law. And if you look in our Constitution, you'll see that one of the things that they did in that Constitution, because of their fear of majorities, they put supermajorities in place. 2/3, for example, when you're ratifying a treaty, and it was 2/3 of the states before they changed this way in which we choose the president, the way we choose our electors who choose the president, because the individuals do not choose the president. The states choose the president, and it took 2/3 of the states to ratify a treaty, and it took a majority of the states, not a majority of the voters, but a majority of the states, in terms of their collective electoral votes. It took a collection of the states, small states as well as large states, in order to select the president after people have gone to the polls. People do not see this. But if it was a democracy that was intended, then the election of the president next year would occur on the first Tuesday after the first Monday in November. But that president is not chosen at that time. What you're doing on that date, through your majority vote, is that you are voting for electors who will then meet on the first Wednesday after the first Monday in December, and then they go to their respective states to their capitals. In our state, for example, we'll be going to Lansing, and they will, in fact, cast their vote in what is called an electoral college. But look how brilliant the scheme is. The electoral college does not even meet in one place, because every state is to cast its ballots independent of every other state, because each state is sovereign. This is the brilliance of the framers, not understood by these people that we have in Congress right now, whose understanding of the foundation of this country is almost nil and void. These people don't know anything. They don't even understand the impeachment process, which I'm going to show today in terms of what I'll be talking about, because I'm just a little bit tired of listening to these people like Lawrence Tribe at Harvard University and the professor emeritus of law at Harvard University, Alan Dershowitz. He doesn't know anything either about this process, or he would not be saying the things he's saying. And Napolitano who is Judge Napolitano is equally confused. I mean, I'm amazed by what I'm hearing. These people are saying. They're saying this on television. You would think they'd be embarrassed to be making these kinds of comments. Such comments as that, in order to bring about impeachment of a civil office holder, really we're talking about the president, but they say civil office holders. We're talking about the president right now because the civil office holder is under the in the crosshairs is the president, not because he's done anything wrong, but because they got to build a case so they can convince the American people he's done something wrong, because they need the color of law to do what they've already intended to do, and they intended to do this before Donald Trump even was inaugurated. This was already intended. I'll be reading some things about that before we get off the air. But this is a full-blown coup d'etat right now. And Franklin, your premise was prescient. A republic, if you can keep it, because every generation has to understand what Paul Robeson, in another genre of understanding of how you have to maintain and protect the bequeathals that you have in place. The Constitution is one part of that. The traditions of the country, the laws, the customs of the country, the culture to be passed down. Every generation has to, in fact, become the custodians of that, or you will, in fact, lose it. A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it. And so today, we are testing once again, as it was done on July the 1st to July the 3rd, when they had the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863, and that date is also right. And Lincoln will go to Gettysburg, back to Gettysburg, 16 days later to deliver the famous address, testing whether this nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated to the republic for which it stands, the flag and so on, to see if that nation can long endure. And that test is on us again here now. And this generation is being called to the task that they were called to perform and carry out with their sacred honor in 1776, 1812, when they had to redo what they had done in the Revolutionary War, and the test again in 1860, well, really, if you want to date the shooting, 1861, but really this war, the tenets of this war, really, you could date it probably around 1857 with the Dred Scott case. And then 1859 with John Brown. That was the first shot that was actually fired. And some other shots with, other things occurred in some of the rebellions, the slave rebellions and things of that sort. You had those things as well. Not the 100 that Herbert Aptheker came up with. There were about 12. And so when you look at the history then, there have been generational challenges made along the way to 2019. And we're now being challenged in this year. It'll be interesting to see how the challenges are, in fact, carried out next year, because American people are going to have to become very educated very quickly about the process, because this president is going to be impeached. And that is already in the works. All they're doing is trying to get the climate in which they can carry this out. And if you understand what's taking place, then you can arm yourself so that you can do your job, because you got a job to do.
I think the impeachment is going to really boomerang on the Democrats. I really think it's going to bite them in the butt. I really do. Mm-hmm. I think people are going to react at the polls, and I wish there was something stronger, because I don't trust the voting system myself. But I think it's going to be, I think they're going to the Democrats are going to find it's going to have an adverse effect of what they were intending to do. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be just the opposite. I really do.
Yeah, I hope you're right, John, because if in fact this moment is lost, if we in fact do not win this battle today, then this republic can be ended. As Malinar was saying in one of his tapes, one of his great tapes, when he's talking about Poland. John, remember when I sent that to you and told you, look at the last part of it, when he dramatically at the end of that tape talking about how people have fought for the establishment of liberty. And then he dramatically said at the end of that tape, he could say it can go out just like that. The fires of liberty. And so this generation is now being called, it's really being compelled. We don't have, there's no sheltered rear. That's what Paul Robeson was saying. Paul Robeson was asked, I think I've said this on the air before. Paul Robeson was asked, the great Paul Robeson, by the way, the one that I don't endorse a lot of what Robeson did in terms of his socialist and communist outlook. I can endorse the struggle he engaged, but I do not, in fact, endorse some aspects of it. But I remember reading about how the young Harry Belafonte, who had just arrived in the country, heard about Paul Robeson and liked him as an artist, because Paul Robeson, who some reports say that he was fluent in 20 languages, and that this man, who was a scholar from Rutgers University, this was a superstar. This was a man who was what you would call a Renaissance man, a polymath. And he admired Paul Robeson's multi-talents, because Paul Robeson was a singer, an actor, one on film and on the stage, Shakespearean actor. He played, for example, in the role of Othello. And he was an up-and-coming star, Belafonte was. And he asked him, because at the time of Belafonte's rise on the stage, Paul Robeson was going down. His career was, in fact, pretty much coming to an end. And so the young Harry Belafonte was sitting at Paul Robeson's feet, so to speak, and he was trying to understand how this great giant, intellectual giant, this entertainment icon, had come down to what he had come down to at that point. And he asked him about would he do it all over again, because Paul Robeson by that time had lost everything. He lost his career, lost his property. He had considerable property investments.
Was he part of that, the investigations during the 50s?
Very much so, because he's the one that, who went before the HUAC committee, the House Un-American Activities Committee, and after that wrote a book called Here I Stand. And so he was standing at that time, and being part of the Communist Network, That was a big problem at that time. And it's certainly not the problem today that it was then, because John Brennan, who was the CIA director, was a communist.
Yeah, my theory, I was talking to a friend about that. I don't want to go too far off, but I think there's divisions within the CIA itself. You got some who are on like globalist view or communist view. You also have some are strong line constitutionalists. I think there are divisions and like partisanship within the CIA itself. Because I've heard people being interviewed who were members of that or have been worked in different capacity in the CIA over the years, and they come across sounding totally different political alignments. And this is within that one agency itself, and some are concurrent members or are employees of the CIA at the same time when this other one was working, and they had different views of what America was about.
Yeah, John, those persons, by the way, that you listen to about the CIA being a more responsible organization, those persons are retired. There's a different CIA in place right now. If you listen to them, the ones talk, like for example, I watch. There's one program I make it a point to watch every day, and I think it's really the Cadillac of TV programming, and that's a Tucker Carlson show that comes on at 8:00 on Fox. I really can't watch those other networks, quite frankly. I have to be honest with you. I'm just like all these other persons that are now moving away from, not that I ever was watching in the first place, and these other stations like MS, they don't even call it MSNBC, they call it MS, the National, MS, National Democratic Caucus, NDC, MSNDC. And so a lot of people are now trekking over to Fox. So when they say mainstream media now, maybe not so much mainstream on MSNBC and CNN. I mean, this is CNN, and well, you can't say that with such a baritone Earl Jones voice anymore, because that's not what people are. The people over there watching Fox now, and there's one program. If you're not watching it, you should tune it in on a regular basis, because I think this program here by this host Tucker Carlson is a Cadillac that's on TV. I like Mark Levine also. That comes on once a week. Comes on Sunday at 10:00 on Life, Liberty, and Levine. That's a pretty good program.
I never liked him, or I never liked Shapiro. I always found those guys more neocons. They love war. I mean, they're always gleeful when America's going to another war. So I never liked those two.
Yeah,
Levine and Shapiro.
I like Levine only because of his constitutional, grounding points. He is really. He does understand a large part of the Constitution. Not that he is making the right points in terms of his understanding of the impeachment. I'm gonna get to that today, hopefully before we get off the air, because I need to clear up some things here because they don't have it, and Mark Levine doesn't have it. Although he's right on some other things, but some of the comments that he's made has been, really stunning to me. But they don't have my literacy. I mean, these people are parrots. Not that Mark Levine is I'm not saying Mark Levine is a parrot. I'm saying that if you listen to these guys, they all make the same mistake. If you hear one of them talking about you need to have treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors in order to impeach a civil office holder of the federal government, they all say that, but all of them are wrong. That's not true. And the Constitution does not require that. And they all making the same mistake. But we're talking about a being called to do our work in this generation, because every generation has to do it. And that's what Paul Robeson was telling Harry Belafonte. Because Robeson had put everything on the line. And I know how that feels because I've been there and done that. I'm shocked that I was able to retire. So I know the mindset that Paul Robeson was in, and by those who are committed today, and the framers, by the way. I even understand from my own vantage point the framers who are dedicated in that room, when they were in fact drawing up the Declaration of Independence, when they said they pledged their word and their sacred honor. I know what that means. You know, you can write about Huey Newton wrote about that. Not about that, but about the mindset. And he called his book Revolutionary Suicide. Because that's a mindset. I know it, because I was in that mindset. To challenge power, you have to be a little bit crazy. That's why I brought this book to the studio. This book here. I got two cameras that I'm speaking through. That's why I'm going back and forth here. I got the Facebook camera here, and I got the camera for allpointtv.com on the right side, my right. The book is called "It is Dangerous to Be Right When the Government is Wrong." But that is the only way you can make a case for freedom. That's the subtitle, The Case for Personal Freedom. That you got to confront, sometimes you got to confront power. And Paul Robeson did not understand that at the beginning point of his career. And that's what he's sharing with Harry Belafonte. Because Harry Belafonte is coming up into Paul Robeson's shoes. And not that he did it as well as he could have, because you had a roadmap to follow with Paul Robeson. And Harry Belafonte went off on the deep end, and he's very angry right now and making some very absurd comments at this point in his life. It's unfortunate, because you're talking to a new generation now that did not come through the ranks, Paul Robeson and others, and they're listening to you in the present without the historical background that you have. And what you're saying can spew out a lot of venom, which is very dangerous for people who are out there floating around and don't have the necessary grounding points to even understand from whence your anger derives. You have to be very careful. And Belafonte should have listened more closely to Paul Robeson, because what Paul Robeson told him is that he said that when Belafonte asked Paul Robeson if he had to do it all over again, knowing what he knew at that moment in time, and then going back into the past when he first started out on his journey to engage in that which is dangerous to be right when the government is wrong, would he in fact, knowing the loss he would have incurred, would he do it all over again? And Paul Robeson, you know, you have to ask yourself these questions. And I asked myself that question, by the way, back in 1972. I knew I was going to be fired. I got in front of the mirror. I went home after school on a Friday one day, and I'll be honest and just tell you, I was talking to myself in the mirror. And I wasn't saying, asking, it's not that Cinderella conversation. It wasn't mirror, mirror on the wall. It wasn't that conversation. It was the question I asked myself, are you serious? Because I knew what they had planned. I said, I'm gone. I mean, but you know, I tell you what happened. I came away from that mirror after I had a self-talk, look at myself in the eye. I decided I was serious, and I couldn't do what they asked me to do.
Oh, by the way, well, we forgot to break there for the WFOV, but anyway, welcome back. We're at the 30-minute mark. Sorry about that. I was listening to you talk too much. I didn't want to break into it, but
yeah. I always break in, John.
Okay.
We don't want to lose our audience at WFOV. We love you over there at 92.1 because you're a great station. And we want to definitely give you your time. We should have taken a break at the 26-minute mark. John, next week we'll give him 8 minutes.
Yeah, but that's like no, because but I don't know. Yeah, what I think is it's a guts. It would be a gutsy thing to do for a teacher to actually want to stand against because let's face it, you're railroaded. Even with your union there, the union's going to back management. That kind of situation.
They'll work if they give them something that benefits the general membership. They'll sacrifice the individual because they get their relevance from the general membership, not from the individuals in it.
I got to stick out here. I mean, I don't usually comment during your time and stuff.
That's all right.
But you talk about that, about sticking up for it. There was a teacher when I was in Lowell, junior high school, that the teachers went on strike 1 year and they got what they wanted, and then a few years later, the support staff, like the janitors and the maintenance people, they're trying to do a contract negotiation with the Board of Education, and the teachers union, the representatives, the leadership had promised these people one time in the years previous, said, hey, if you walk out with us and effectively shut down schools so we can get what we want, we'll do that same thing for you. When it came around for these janitors and everybody else, the union representing them asked the teachers union representatives to do this, honor their word, they balked at it. Well, this one teacher remembered that they made this promise to the support staff's union, and he was outraged at the union, the teachers union didn't honor that, and he struck. He didn't go into the classroom. He actually was on the picket line with the janitors and everybody else. And he's kind of a bearded guy, kind of looked like he had the look of Serpico back then. You remember Frank Serpico? Yeah. And I think his last name was McCrandle. So I mean, if he's out there, Herb McCrandle, I think that was it. If you were listening, I don't think he would because he was on the left more. But I still I have a great deal of honor and respect for that individual because he stood up and his own union had turned on him. Yeah. His own union turned on him. They actually tried to get him fired himself. His own union.
John is talking. Those on Facebook, you can't hear John's comments. He's on the live feed with WFOV and with allpointstv.com, so Facebook won't be able to hear the comments that John is making. But he's just simply echoing the sentiment that, in these organizations, the individual sometimes is made into a sacrificial lamb in order to benefit the general membership because it's all about the dues and it's all about the collective rather than the individual. But, you have to have these self-talks. If you're going to make a dent in the status quo and to bring about changes for the better, then sometimes it involves a lot of risk-taking. And so I can understand those framers saying that they pledge to each other their word and their sacred honor. In other words, they were swearing that they would stand up on these ideals they had written because they're in that room. They're in that room with creating the Declaration of Independence. This is a revolutionary document. I mean, look at those words in that document. We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. That's in King George III's face, because King George III is making a claim in the opposition to the idea that the rights come from what the king says. Don't forget, only kings were obeyed before the framers did what they were doing. That all men are created equal, that they are endowed with certain unalienable rights. They're telling King George III that the rights don't come from the king. Their rights come from their humanity. And they are speaking to King George III right in his face. Go read the original document and see Hamilton wrote his name above all the other names and wrote it larger than the other names. And that was because he wanted to make sure that King George III, who wore glasses, could see his name without his specs, and said so. That's the mentality they had. These people were revolutionaries, and they were willing to create revolutionary suicide, which is the possibility in that room. No wonder they said that we must all hang together, because if we don't hang together, we're going to hang separately. So Huey Newton didn't create anything new when he wrote the book called Revolutionary Suicide, because they're talking about that in that room. And then 11 years later, in Philadelphia, there's Franklin saying, we are here creating a republic if you can keep it. That's passed, all that history passed down to Paul Robeson's generation. And there's now Belafonte learning this lesson. He's learning the lesson of a republic if you can keep it. In other words, not in that terminology, but in other terminologies, in terms of how it translates into other dimensions of struggle for a better quality of life. And Belafonte taught Harry Belafonte well, better than Harry Belafonte is teaching this generation. You have to be very careful. I went home, I never forget, one day a student told me in my class, he told me, Mr. Moss, you're the first ones ever talked to us. You know, I went home that day and I was really weighed down. My shoulders were drooping because I went home that day and I opened my books up because I was always doing a lot of studying so that I can go in the classroom really fresh with a lot of ideas so that the hour would seem very short. And I went home burdened that day because I understood that if that were true, that I was the only one I was the first one that ever talked to them, meaning that they had never had someone who would spend the whole hour talking. And I'll be honest, I had classes where the bell would sound, no students would move. I had a lot of energy and I was young and would sometimes stand on top of the desk dramatically, do things like that in the classroom. Tell the students this point is too powerful for me to stand down here and say that I have to get on top of the desk and say it. And they're now looking up, I'm on the desk. And so I went home that day and I was very burdened because what I was thinking about is, my goodness, if I'm the first person that's ever talked to them, I got to get this stuff right. I can't afford to be making mistakes. Because if I'm the only one that's out there teaching these things that I'm teaching, then I got to make sure that I'm on point. That's why I was doing so much. I had roommates. They would leave out Saturday morning and they see me in a chair. And they go out and have breakfast or wherever they would go. And they come back late in the afternoon, 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They come back and and they see me in the front room, still in that chair, and they say, I don't believe this. And I was trying to get it right. Because I understood the burden that I was under. And I didn't mean I was trying to get it right for the administration, because I had read the book called The Way It's Supposed to Be, and I wasn't doing it the way it was supposed to be. And so that was a problem. And so I had to be serious about this. And when I decided I was serious, then that was it. That case was closed. Now, was I crazy? Yep, I was crazy. You have to be a little bit crazy to do what I did and what these others did. You have to be crazy to do what the Framers did. That's what it takes. This road is not going to be easy. And Paul Robeson taught you well, Harry Belafonte. You have to get this right. Paul Robeson said that he would do the same thing over again, but there's one thing he did not understand. And that was that every generation has to stand up and save itself. That's really the same thing Derek Bell wrote about, the former Harvard professor wrote about. He didn't get a lot of things right, but he got this one right in his book called Voices at the Bottom of the Well. He got it right there. because he was repeating some of the same understandings. They're not necessarily had come from Paul Robeson, but his own understandings based upon what he had gone through at Harvard University. And that is that he understood that, as he wrote in his book, another book he wrote, and we are not saved. You're never saved. Franklin said it in his way. A republic if you can keep it. Because there are always the forces of light and they're the forces of darkness. And I have to tell you, Donald Trump, if he survives this, will go down in history as a force of light in this country. Because this man has tried to pull this country back from the brink, from where it was going under Obama, who tried to pass it off to another Saul Alinskyite. And the American people rose up against it.
Could you imagine if there's like, say, remember like the series of the movie called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington?
Yeah.
Okay, could you imagine if a real Mr. Smith, maybe it was Jimmy Stewart, I believe, wasn't it?
It was Jimmy Stewart.
Okay, could you imagine if you or I or anybody else who didn't have the resources Donald Trump had and made it to the presidency, if you could avoid, if you somehow, miraculously, everything worked in your favor, the wind was at your back, God smiled at you, whatever, you made it to that point. Could you imagine how you would have been annihilated? You would have been annihilated. I mean, butchered. You would have been butchered. Even try to say take the oath of office.
Yes.
They would have had forces aligned against you to probably take out your entire family and everything else.
Yes, that's right. If you didn't have, you talk about the resources, John, that Donald Trump had, but do not underestimate the intestinal fortitude of this man.
Somebody tried to report, that he was sitting there crying and weeping and stuff. You know what? I don't believe that
No, that's
about
not
him.
true.
But I would be.
I read that too.
But I would be compelled. I would feel like that because I've said comments here. Like the other day, I was just telling you today about that guy told me to shut my GD mouth.
Yeah.
When I was stating a fact. Because, see, they don't like facts. The leftists don't like facts. They want to repeat their lies so much it overcrowds the truth. That's what they want.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what, could you imagine if you and I or anybody else who just basically, we think our country's going off the rails, so we ran for office. They would annihilate us. They would butcher your family and everything else. If this man didn't have, he had his protection and stuff like that for his family in place and paid for it, if we could do something like that, we could probably better, address these issues. But right now, we're all intimidated because the press would come at you. Anything you said in the past, they're going to make a mountain out of the proverbial molehill. They would do everything to annihilate you.
John, we have a calling right now. It's a calling to arms. I'm not talking about picking up any physical arms. It's a call for the American people to be vigilant about their responsibility of maintaining the inheritance that was passed down on 2 occasions, both of them in Philadelphia. And that would be the drafting of the Declaration of Independence and the drafting of something the world had never seen before. Because we had never had a document drawn up at the beginning of the state's development, before its establishment, before its creation, to tell the government what it could and could not do based upon the inalienable rights of its citizens. That's a first. That's what Franklin is talking about. And they put particulars in place, even how to remove an office holder. And where do we get that from? Because you don't remove kings, except the way that they remove Louis XV and Marie Antoinette, Charles I in 1649. The only way they could be removed was by beheading the king, because there were no constitutional restraints put in place to remove them otherwise. But look at what the framers did. A republic, if you can keep it, even a way in which in the republic you can, in fact, have recourse against leaders. They do not have the right to suborn the inalienable rights, the rights that people are born with. And so there's a procedure, but that procedure should not be abused. And that's why we are called upon to understand the impeachment process. I listen to these jokers out here, and they're talking about impeachable offenses. Let me tell you something, folks. There's no such thing as an impeachable offense, because impeachment as a protocol in the Constitution is only something that takes a majority vote in the House of Representatives under Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. That's correct. Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5, that says that the House shall choose its Speaker and shall have the sole power of impeachment. That's all it takes. What they're talking about, Mark Levine and others, is that they do not understand that what they are referencing is what's found in a different section of the Constitution, not found in Article 1. Because Article 1 does something different. Article 1 takes the impeachment process up to another level, where we're now talking about something much more severe, and that is removing an office holder that has been placed there either by the American people or placed there by the person that has been placed there by the American people. You see, all civil office holders of the United States are appointed by the president. Take that to the bank, Mark Levine, Judge Knapp, Alan Dershowitz, and this airhead at Harvard University, Lawrence Tribe. I wish you would call, because I want to straighten you out. The things you're saying, if you're teaching that nonsense to your students, you are irresponsible. Talking about the conversation between Donald Trump and Zelensky calls for impeachment. You didn't read the comment. You must not have read the transcript. You must have been listening to Schiff. They tried to act like he was reading the transcript of the conversation between the President of the United States and the President of Ukraine. And they were not counting on Donald Trump to outsmart them, because you don't normally put out in the public domain these private conversations, because it hurts the protocols of these conversations in the future. But Donald Trump has to fight this battle now. He has to survive now. And so Donald Trump did what they did not intend for him to do and did not think he would do. But Donald Trump, don't forget, is not a traditional politician, and Donald Trump released the transcript. And that's why Adam Schiff was on that, who's the chair of the Intel Committee in the House of Representatives, was trying to pretend he was reading from the transcript and got caught at it, and then talked about he was, in fact, doing a parody of the speech. Imagine that. A man that's over the Intel Committee, the second most powerful committee in the House. The House Judiciary Committee is the most powerful committee in the House, because it is the one that, in fact, brings about the recommendation to the House to bring about the impeachment of the president. And given that they got Nadler over there, another renegade anti-constitutionalist that's in the Congress, and they're full of these kind of people. That's why this is so dangerous. It's dangerous to be right when the government is wrong, and this government is wrong. They're trying to impeach not only the president, they're trying to impeach a duly held election in this country, and they must be stopped now. They have to be stopped. and the American people are being called to understand the impeachment process, which is a political process and not a legal process. And let me read this to you. Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7. It's going to be found there. No, don't worry about it. Here's what Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7 says, and if it's, to show you that this is a political process. They try to act like it's a legal process. Article 1, Section 3, Section 3, Clause 7, right here. Judgment, in, I'm reading from the Constitution. Judgment in cases of impeachment. Listen carefully, you members of Congress, because you're talking about you're trying to determine which one of your police forces will go and put these people in jail, because you think that once you impeach, that something legal happens based upon the impeachment, because you don't understand the Constitution either. Article 1, Section 3, Clause 7 says this: judgment in cases of impeachment shall not extend further than to removal from office. In other words, after impeachment, and if the person is convicted upon the impeachment and the charges are treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors, then the extent of the authority of those that brought about the impeachment and the conviction on the charges of impeachment, if the charges are treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors, because it doesn't have to be those charges. But if it is those charges, then the president, based on Article 2, Section 4, is removed from power under those conditions.
Now, Clinton was impeached, but he wasn't removed from
was
office.
not removed, that's
Yeah.
right. Impeached, but not removed.
And we got a clear-cut case right on where he was a broadcast that he lied under oath,
Yes,
which
he
is
did.
perjury. So
Yeah, because, but you see, and that's why Mark Levine is wrong in the thing he just said last week. And when Mark Levine said that what the Senate should do, given the bogus claims that are being made against the president at this time, that the Senate should then tell the House that we are going to stop this at the door. We're not even going to allow the hearing of these bogus charges to be heard in the Senate. You can't do that either, because that's Article. Don't tell me. That is Article 1, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 5. Or is it Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2? It's one of those two. Article 1, let me see. I got to find it. I think it's Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2. That's what I'm going to say. Let's see how close I am here. Article 5, let's see. Article 1, Section 5. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5. I got so many of these different clauses in my head right now. I can tell you what it says, but I was trying to find. I wanted to read it because I don't. If I can quote it. But I wanted to find the exact location of it. What it says. I'll tell you next week where it's located. I got too many different clauses circulating in my brain right now. This old man is the old great man is not what it used to be. But what it says is that the House shall, and that's Article 1, Section 5, Clause 2. I am sure that that's where it is. Yep. I got it. Listen to this right here. Each house, listen to this very carefully, Mark Levine. Each house may determine the rules of its proceedings, punish its members for disorderly behavior, and with the concurrence of 2/3 vote, expel a member. That means the House has its specific prerogatives independent of the Senate, and the Senate has its prerogatives independent of the House. So you cannot do what Mark Levine said. Let them hear the whatever they bring to the Senate. The Senate has an obligation under Article 2, Section 4, where it says, and I will quote this, and we'll get off the air at this point after this quote. And this time I won't make a mistake. In Article 2, Section 4, it says, the President and Vice President and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. That's what it takes to remove the president. And where they're confused is that they think those are the requirements for the impeachment of the president and other civil officers of the United States. And that's where they're confused. Article 1 deals with impeachment. Article 2 deals with removal based on the impeachment. Get it right, you guys, because you don't have it. And I'm going to teach you the Constitution as we go through this process, because we're not through yet. We are not over the hump yet. Okay, we're going to get out of here. Want you to stay tuned to all the programs here at allpointstv.com. And don't forget to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.